switch up. I've got, if you might have noticed last week, topic or the title of the class is Parenting Young Families. You'll see through our lesson today that I've changed that up to Parenting Children. And I always like to have a picture at the beginning just to remind us all how difficult it can be, and nobody's perfect at doing it. So those are fun. I think everybody survived that, so that's good. If you did have a questionnaire from last week, if you could turn that in, you can either turn it in here at the end of class on one of the chairs or in my box at G4, so it's all good. All right, I want to get right to it because that might be one of the few times I actually might go a little bit long as far as one of the lessons. But if you think about it, when a couple gets started down the road in life and they get married, there's sometimes either friends or people with good intentions, maybe a family member, come up with that question. So when are you going to start a family? Okay, and sometimes
after you get married. Okay, now when are you going to start?
Exactly right after you get started. And there are other things out there. How to know if you're ready to start a family. You can go out on Wikipedia or anywhere online. You'll get all of this. I found this article a while back. Start of it was, deciding to start your own family is a difficult decision. Although it can be one of the most rewarding areas in life, it is also demanding of your time, money. There's no guarantee of success. Here's some things to consider for this quest. And it goes on to reference having a child and going from there. So I've got a pop quiz for you. Which of these two couples is starting a family? The one on the right. I think you guys all tumbled to where I'm getting at with that. A lot of the times our society thinks you aren't really a family until you have kids. Well, that's where Edna and Wiki get it wrong. Husband and wife are already a family. Some might see that as a distinction with not much of a difference, but I'd like to put forward the idea that, yeah, that's one of the major problems that we have today with our family, and maybe some dysfunction that goes along with that. First problem is downplaying the significance of the husband-wife relationship. Okay, now we'll really get going. This is something that I don't think gets lended enough credence in people thinking about, okay, our family has started, we're a family unit. And then this, in turn, I think also goes into gets people in the trap of child-centered parenting, when so much attention is given, okay, well, now that you have the child coming, now you're a family. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Part of this has to do with right beginnings. Many times parents forget that they are bringing an addition to the family when they have a child. This is not the start of your family. You already had your family going. Now we just have an addition to it. Marriage is the key to it. It's the preliminary relationship to child rearing, and this is the relationship that really needs to have the focus. It's an ongoing priority relationship, and it's been established by God. You say, well, okay, well, what's, a lot of the times, by the time we get married, maybe we've been had a couple years together, get to know each other, and all our weird idiosyncrasies, and finally get that figured out, and then the kid comes along, and everything just kind of blows up and scattered. It's important to have this idea of this priority relationship given the attention that it needs. Well, let's think about this a little bit and what we're talking about. It has to do with going all the way back to the beginning. Genesis 1, chapter 1. God comes in, he creates the world, he creates animals, and then he creates man. Genesis chapter 2, 7 through 17, Adam's alone in the garden and he's tending it. Everything seems to be going along pretty much swimmingly. And you remember at the end of God's creation, he says, and God saw that it was good. But it comes to a point where God says it is not good. He says it's not good for man to be alone. Adam is not alone in the truest sense, is he? Who is he there with? Okay, God. Okay, he's also got, what else is going on there in the garden? He's pretty much got all the pets he wants, right? He's got the perfect relationship with God. He walks and talks together with God. He sees him face to face and he does not die. Okay. He's got the coolest pets ever. So in the truest sense, Adam, God says it's not good for him to be alone. Well, what's he talking about? Because he's got this relationship, vertical ascending relationship with God, about as close as you could get. He's got this descending relationship with the animals, so he's got stuff to keep him busy and all that. What's missing? It's that sweet spot in the middle. He's got an intimacy relationship on an equal plane that's missing, and that's what God sees and says isn't good. So we got an equal relationship that comes about. The Lord God said it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him. And all the animals said, yeah, I could have told you it's not good for man to be alone, because you see things like this happen when guys get together. And sometimes we need an outside force, tempering our what we think our abilities are, or what have you. So it seems God could have tried to impress upon Adam what he was missing by having him name the animals, because after he says it's not good for him to be alone, he has him name all the animals. Kind of interesting. Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals, all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he could name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. Do you think God knew that before he went through this exercise? It's just speculation on my part, but I think he did. He knows that none of these are going to fulfill Adam, but maybe he needs to impress upon Adam there's something missing in your life too. So he goes through and he has them name all the animals. And then God takes care of this deficiency that he sees. So the Lord God caused man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. Okay, so when God sees this problem, that he doesn't have a suitable helper, he doesn't have an equal relationship, he brings forth woman and creates her. He sees the blessing of a partner made to be his helpmate. Adam recognizes that and expresses that. He says, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Written down in Genesis. This is our framework. This is our plan, as it was from the beginning. So for the first time, man now has an equal relationship with somebody that he can react to and see on the same level. A few observations from this. God unites the man and woman. Okay? A lot of times we think about that, but in a way, God doesn't say, let's see if this works. He doesn't just stick her in the garden like a big sociology experiment or something and hope that the species, are predatory or anything like that. He brings her to him. You could say that God presides over the first marriage, because he says, look, Adam, this is who I've made, and gives her the idea this completes him. A few more observations. God finishes his creation at this point. So as he said, saw creation was good, God doesn't see any reason to go any further than this from this point. He says, at this point, it's truly finished. God had previously stated creation was very good, and now he just does one more thing to improve that. This one flesh union of a man and woman is the only reason stated for leaving one's parents. That's also an indication of a family that started. Okay, so at the beginning, and Jesus references this later, this one flesh union of the man and wife, that's the reason why you separate from your father and mother, and boom, you've started your own family there. The scriptures emphasize the value of marriage and marital faithfulness. Christ himself reiterates this one flesh for life pattern in Matthew 19:4-6. Haven't you already replied at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. So from the beginning, that's how it was set up. When Christ comes and is establishing the New Testament, there's no change to that. He harkens back to that when they start asking him things about, marriage and questions about that and divorce. He says, no, this was the pattern. This was what we should have been following the whole time. Ephesians 5:25 through 33, we get a picture of what marriage should be. And writers throughout Scripture symbolize Christ in the believer and Christ in the church in terms of marriage. So what our society has kind of taken and made an optional agreement, a contract you can get out of pretty easily. From the beginning, that's not the case of how it was set up to be. Okay, so we have creation's perfect picture. Brings in helpmate form, but what's not addressed at this point? Well, these little guys, right? Nothing mentioned about children so far. We know that the husband completes the wife and the wife completes the husband. Children do not complete the family. It's not a knock on children. I'm not bashing kids in any way. A lot of times you had kind of the idea, I think maybe in the past, I think we've gone beyond it, but well, they're having marital strife. If they just get a kid, that'll help things out, make them get their priorities straight. No, that's not the case. Children expand the family. They don't complete it. They're a wonderful blessing. They're an addition to an already established unit. So that's kind of when we talk about the importance of this relationship with husband and wife and how it affects the family, that's why we want to make sure we get that priority straight, because there are a lot of times in our society where that gets turned on its head. Well, didn't you mention something about child-centered parenting? Yeah, we're going to get to that. Okay. Principles to guide your family. By God's design, and read that the way it's supposed to work. It's out of our manual that we've been given to see how life works. The husband and wife relationship is the first social relationship established in Scripture. And there is a significance in that, as we've kind of pointed to. By God's design, the husband-wife relationship is primary in the network of interdependent relationships. The parent-child relationship is directly affected by the prior and is secondary to it. And that can cause a lot of friction. Just going by our picture that we have up here, who are we dealing with here? Kind of hard to see, but it looks like that guy's got some fur on his forearms. There we go. Okay, we've got Isaac. And that wonderful family dynamic of Isaac and Rebekah, where Isaac and Rebekah, I don't know how to say that. I was going to say, are they good parents? I guess we could go there with that. Were Isaac and Rebekah good parents, or did they have a lot of work to do? I think you can make the case they had a lot of work to do. What's going on this session here? You can see him kind of staring out blindly into space. Why is he? Oh, okay. This is Isaac. He's pretty much laid up. He's blind at this point. Jacob and Esau have had a hard relationship already because who was the oldest? Esau. Jacob's the youngest. If we remember our story or that account correctly, Jacob liked to do what? Liked to cook. He liked to stay around the tents. I think we would, if it's not politically incorrect to say it, he was a mama's boy, right? Esau was kind of the opposite. Whose favorite was he? He was Dad's favorite. He's the one who's out hunting. He's out there doing that stuff. So we see at this point there's a problem because Jacob is in here masquerading. I'm thinking Esau must have been a really hairy guy, because if you're wearing goat skins on your arm and you think, oh, that's my son, okay. But that's what this is. This is all deception here. And this is the point where Jacob is getting the blessing. He's already got the birthright from Esau, but Esau might have played that off thinking, well, it's not that big of a deal. I'm hungry, yeah, I'll give it to you, whatever. Dad's going to bless me anyway. Well, the blessing comes down, and then it's sealed. So all of this problem between Jacob and Esau is cemented in a deeper problem, and that's the primary relationship between Isaac and Rebekah. They should have had all of this figured out already. They should have come to an agreement on not playing favorites and made this a better family dynamic all the way around. By God's design, the husband-wife relationship must be viewed as the priority relationship with the family. What happens when it isn't? Well, you can get a lot of different problems going on, a little bit of chaos. Since marriage is the priority relationship, all other relationships must be subject to that. And that includes, dads with their daughters, dads, sons, moms, sons and daughters, the whole thing. Well, mom and dad is the priority. What if Johnny or Susie gets jealous? Well, that's going to happen. There's often a point in a toddler's development where they want to have one parent or the other all to themselves. It can show itself even when you go down to sit and read a book or something. The kid's like trying to worm their way in between you and pushing dad off to the side. No, mom's mine, that kind of a thing. But kids adapt to that as not being reality, and they move on. However, long-term and beneficial effects of a husband and wife showing love for each other, and that being the primary relationship, and patterning that for the child teaches them the right way. It's essential for their development. Okay, so what are we talking about when we talk about child-centered parenting? Anybody run into this or done any reading on it or anything? Well, I did, so that's good. What do you think it infers?
The kid is the center of the universe.
Oh, okay, yeah. Little Johnny comes into our lives and everything revolves around him. Often parents get consumed in a new relation of a child and the new responsibility, and they let the husband and wife relationship die on the vine. The child is not welcomed as a new member to the family, but the child is the nucleus of the family at this point. Instead of integrating the child into the give and take flow of everyday life, all of our responsibilities, all the things that we have to do, the child is elevated to the level that life revolves around him or her. A lot of people are going to say, well, duh, that's because it does. Oh, you're right. So how are we supposed to deal with that? It's the world we're living in. We're married, we're a couple, all of a sudden we're thrown into this deal where we've got to have sippy cups, we got to have binkies, we got to have funny little car seats we can't figure out how to use. And then you find out that after you get one 9 months, it's expired or something. It's a lot to keep up with, and it just seems like I can remember walking out of the hospital with Taylor and thinking, these people are idiots. They're letting us take a baby out of here. Well, the reality is that Junior will have needs that have to be attended to right away for a while. But you just need to know when to say when. Life is a balance. Now, often we think of the balance as right down the middle. The scales of justice is what we have. Well, if we're balanced, things are right down the middle. But is that really balance? I think of it more as an equalizer. So all the things that we go through, there's going to be certain aspects that is it a straight line right across, everything gets equal time? No. You've got to be able to see what the priorities need to be, and you need to give each priority its time. I'm going to talk about child-centered parenting, and I don't want to give the idea that I'm just here to bash that, okay? You're going to hear me point out some bad aspects or outcomes of child-centered parenting. Does that mean all the issues that the people are trying to correct when they go that route aren't really issues at all and don't need to be addressed? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that they've got valid concerns, but whether these concerns justify their actions is the question. Okay, you see this as a problem, and you're going at this problem with this mode of correction. Well, make sure you know what the consequences are to those actions that you're taking. Okay. In Psychology Today, there was Michael Mascalo, PhD, up here. He studies in, I forget the name of the institution now. It's up in Massachusetts. I think, I want to say Fairfax, but I don't know if I've got that right. But it's pretty much around the Ivy League set. You know, Massachusetts, it's kind of a hotbed for a lot of our intellectual studies, a lot of our good universities up there. He writes this, May 15, 2015. We are often told that it is good for parents to be child-centered. The child-centered movement was an alternative to what is sometimes called adult-centered parenting. In adult-centered parenting, parents set the rules and children are expected to follow them. In contrast, child-centered parenting is parenting organized around the needs. Now I put the parentheses there, maybe wants, and interests of the child rather than those of the parent. On the outset, that seems like a pretty noble goal. Well, I need to invest in my kid's life. I need to make sure that I'm not putting my career, my life choices. I don't need to look at this kid as an inconvenience. This new child needs to have my attention, needs to have my love, needs to have my support. So that's what I'm saying. That kind of a thought has a very lofty and noble goal. There's a lot of good things to aim for in that we should. But we run some problems with child-centered parenting. It runs the risk of producing entitled, narcissistic children who lack the capacity to persevere and cope with difficulty. This is because there's a fine line between being loving. Again, I kind of put some synonyms in there we could put. Being compassionate, being understanding, being fair, and trying to do that and then becoming indulgent. The way that he kind of put some flesh on the bones of this is talking about interaction with a mom and her daughter. A lot of times in this kind of a model of parenting, they think, okay, well, I want my daughter to go ahead and realize that she has to come to the realization, I need to keep my room picked up. And she's going to see the benefit of that. But it's got to come from the heart. She really has to want to do it. So I'm going to, oh, Susie, don't you think it'd be a good idea to clean up your room? Susie said, yeah, I guess. You know, she wants to please mom. So sure, that sounds like a noble goal. We'll put that on the agenda. A week later, nothing different happens. Mom says, Susie, okay, we talked about this, but I think it's time for me to, say, clean up your room. Yeah, you need to do that. Not just put it on the agenda, put that up, comes back a day later, it's not done. And what happens with mom? She's at the end of her rope, isn't she? So, boom. Argument comes up. Susie, get in here, clean up your room now. What has Susie been taught by mom when mom makes a request? Okay. Yeah, we won't go into the counting thing. That drives me crazy. But she's okay. Yeah, mom's giving her suggestions. But who's in charge as a kid-centered world? Well, she's been taught she's in charge. So when mom comes in, it's only natural Susie's going to take offense. Well, I'll clean up when I'm ready, Mom. You can tell I've seen that a few times, huh? There are several reasons why many American parents endorse the child-centered parenting model. Okay, child-centered parents want to foster child's autonomy. What do you mean by autonomy? Self-governing. Okay. We want to be able to have the kid. It goes back to Susie's mom. Susie's mom would rather have her kids see the importance of cleaning up her room and have Susie do it. Okay. So she wants her to foster this autonomy of, okay, I am going to be a good citizen and clean up my room, and I'm in charge, and nobody's going to tell me what to do. Are there good things in autonomy for children? Well, by some point we have to train them to be that way, right? Right. But at some point when they're going off to high school, when they're going off to college, they better have that figured out by then, right? Nobody's telling, both in two terms, nobody tells you what to do, so nobody evil takes advantage of you. But also, when they get out in the real world, does the boss want to have, okay, yeah, come on in here, you're going to be in charge of accounts payable. Now, go ahead through those ledgers and make sure that they balance, okay? And have your kid go through and balance them and saying, there, now what? No, they want somebody who's going to take initiative. They want somebody who's going to go through and see what needs to be done and do it. And that's what we're trying to foster in children. But a lot of the times, these parents are starting to try to foster that when the kid's 3. That doesn't make too much sense. And all of these things are a gradual kind of, balancing act that you've got to go ahead and give the kid what they need at that proper time. But this goes a little bit overboard in that area. They're trying to foster the initiative, the creativity. Such parents often feel that children learn best when they actively discover things for themselves. Okay? There's some validity to that. As a result, they feel that too much parental direction can undercut a child's autonomy. As a result, child-centered parents adopt a less directive role. To borrow a phrase from child-centered education movement, they choose to be the guide on the side rather than the sage on the stage. What do you mean? What do you think they're meaning by sage on the stage? Okay, guide on the side basically is taking them out. This, I don't know, it kind of smacks to me of, it's almost a snarky jab at parents who are in there actually making their kids do things. Well, we let our kids, figure that out for themselves because we're the guide on the side. We don't need to be center stage. So all of a sudden, because you're the one correcting your kid, well, you're such a prima donna that you just can't have your kid mess up. So, I'm sure not everybody has that feeling, but I'm sure there's some of them out there anyway. It seems to be that way. There's more of the reasons why maybe in our American society parents ascribe to this. Parents love their children, okay? When we love someone, we want the best for them. Sometimes parents feel that loving children means making them experience good feelings and protecting them from bad feelings. Similarly, parents often believe that children need to feel good about themselves, have positive self-esteem before they can be successful. As a result, parents often try to praise children whenever possible. They withhold critical feedback out of fear it might damage the child's self-esteem. Self-esteem seemed to be really big when we had our kids coming through elementary school and all that. I don't know if that's changed or not. Some parents think of their children as if they were little adults who have rights that are more or less the same as adults. Such parents tend to see their child more or less as equals. As a result, they may feel that directing their children means imposing their values on their children. For such parents, this means infringing on a child's right to make his or her own choices. And I've seen that. I've had a coworker when, I think even before I had kids, and we were just having a discussion. And it came back to about religion, and I said, oh yeah, are you going to raise your kids in your faith? Well, we're going to let them make that decision themselves. I said, really? She said, yeah. I said, are you going to let them make their own decision on whether they cross the street on a walk green or a don't walk? She said, well, no. Are you going to let them have the decision of running around in the parking lot as opposed to staying in the lawn where they should be playing? Well, no. I said, okay, well, to me, the eternal values, the eternal salvation of somebody that goes along with your religious beliefs, I would think, are a little bit more higher in priority than maybe even some of these other things. Why would you let your children make their own decision on that? Why aren't you guiding them? And she said, well, I just don't want to be imposing my beliefs on them. Okay. While these ideas were born of good intentions, they're deeply flawed, and while each of these ideas contain an element of truth, they are only half-truths. It is true that children I don't think that are supposed to be there. It's true that children act out of curiosity, but without parental guidance, children cannot learn to go beyond their comfort zones and learn about things that do not interest them. Okay. That's a valid point. Sometimes you get a kid coming home and, we got to learn about history. I don't like history. Okay, you don't have to like it. You just have to learn about it. You're going to get graded on it. It is true that children need loving parents who are sensitive to their emotions, but they also need adults who teach them how to cope with hardship, struggle, and failure. I think I used the term helicopter parenting last week in class, and Kendall said, are you going to talk about lawnmower parenting? I said, what's that? She said, that's where the parent goes in front of the kid and takes a lawnmower and just bulldozer maybe. whatever obstacle's in front of the kid, boom, we got to take that out of their way so they're not discomforted or inconvenienced by that. I think that's what this is getting to. People trying to make sure that, you know, Johnny doesn't have anything disrupt his life. Was that reality? It shouldn't be what we're training our kids for. We should be training them to cope instead of that they're not going to have a struggle.
Dana, an example of that we've been dealing with recently is that, you know, with our oldest son now, he's driving, and, you know, I'm sure you can relate that you're like, okay, we live in a place where there's going to be snow, so, you know, let's make sure that, you know, my responsibility as a dad in that situation is to make sure that the car that we're giving our kid is, you know, a reliable car, it's got good tires, you know, good brakes and all that stuff. But when we put him in there and set him out, we can't restrict him to driving only on clear days, you know.
Right.
So it's almost like, you know, we are terrified. We want to protect him, make sure that, you know, I almost want to follow him everywhere he goes, you know, in my vehicle. When
Yeah.
he can't see me, you know.
Or
But you just can't do that. You can't just always be there and protecting your kid every step of the way.
right to your point, you give them the tools that they need to drive safely, but you are down in front of him with a snow plow, making sure that all the streets are clear. Okay. Yeah. There's an app for that? Richard?
Another thing about imposing beliefs, if you don't impose your beliefs as a parent, in terms of your morals, your ethics, your integrity, your character, if you don't impose those, someone will impose their beliefs on that.
Yes.
Whether it's TV, or whether it's music, or whether it's some entertainment person that they really look up to, or whether it's going to school and the philosophy of the worldview of their teachers or instructors, their friends, probably are one of the largest influences in their lives, or their friends, especially as they get into the teen years and so forth. Someone's going to impose their beliefs, and so if you have godly beliefs, then if you can impose them in a balanced way, of course, then you have that right as a parent to do that very thing.
Yeah, that's always our battle, is to make the kids think, but not think for them. But going to your point, if you're not imposing the values, your kid's going to think maybe a couple of things. One, either you're not smart enough to have values, because I kind of think that about parents anyway. But they also get the idea that it's not important to you. Well, if it was important, Dad would have said something about it. So, you know, if Dad's not making me go to church, well, I guess church isn't that big of a deal. If I'm going to sit back and say, well, you know, they're 13 now, they should have it in their heart whether they want to go to church or not. So if it's not really a conviction by them at 13 to get up and get out of bed, I'm not going to make them get out of bed. It's got to come from them. Well, what have you just patterned for them? Well, church must not be that big of a deal if they're not going to make me do it. That kind of a thing. Getting back, and it's true that children have rights, but these rights do not make them equal as adults. Okay. In my class last week, I talked about having a standard for when we're looking what people say. What standard was that? I hope I said that last week. Last week when I was talking about, we would look at what people had to say, different psychologists, sociologists, and all that, but our standard was what? Is this right here, right? How well is it in sync with that? So I thought we'd do a little check on our Dr. Mascalo here and see how he's doing. What's our standard? Proverbs 29:15. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child who gets his own way brings shame to his mother. Okay. Probably could have shortened up that article Mr. Mascalo gave, or Dr. Mascalo gave us. That is kind of the crux of it there. A child who gets their own way. Okay. Does that mean we're never to let a kid make a decision, or no, you've got to foster that, obviously. But in talking about a child especially, that's something that we always battle because it's inherent in them. Oh yeah, and I said the wisest man who ever lives. That's direct from Solomon, right, in Proverbs. He seems to be in line with what we would think would be biblical values with that. Parents need to be both directive and supportive, to have high expectations and provide loving care, to praise success but also teach children how to cope with and persevere through failure, to respect children and embrace the legitimacy of their parental authority. That's a lot of words there. Children come into the world incomplete. They need the active direction and sensitive support of loving parents to help complete them. So I don't think there's anything that Dr. Mascalo here is sharing with us that doesn't seem to be pretty good advice and in line with what we see in scriptures. Okay, some time to discuss a few things, bad outcomes of child-centered rearing if it's taken too far. The marriage relationship gets put to the back burner, okay? If we got Johnny as the center of our universe, all things go to him, well, we might like it that way too, with the relationship being on the back burner. Maybe in some ways being a parent lets us focus on smaller battles with the children than the ones we need to address as spouses. Okay, just a thought there. We foster a sense of autonomy in the child that is a fallacy. When they go out into the world to relate to authority, they'll be in for a rude awakening. Okay. Yeah, you could tell the kids who get to elementary school and have just a culture shock because all of a sudden things aren't geared only to them. They've got to follow some other rules. We foster a sense of independence, separation, and not interdependence. This makes it easier for a child to become a taker rather than a giver. What I mean by that is Johnny's the center of the family. Johnny isn't taught that, hey, family is important. Your mom and I are the heads of the family. Everybody works together for the good. We're in charge. Everybody benefits from all of us putting together and taking care of each other. Instead, they're seen as the focus. They see people in the world as a means to an end instead of an actual person. The child will form decisions on what they can get from a relationship rather than what they can give. And loyalty to family or friends is hard to develop. Okay? So if we're fostering this idea that you're the center of the universe, all we're doing is playing into their natural tendency to do that anyway.
Well, can I say something? In China, they call them, there's a word they've used, and it's called little sultans because they have only that one child.
Mm-hmm.
And it rules the world, so they're called little sultans or little emperors.
Little Emperor, I think. Yeah, I'd seen something about that. Magnify the natural conflict within the child of human nature versus moral conformity to biblical principles. We become enablers to our kids' natural tendency to put themselves first. Because that's something we fight all our lives, isn't it? I mean, it's not like it gets easier with age, but the tendency is, to watch out for yourself first. But what I don't get are the parents who are kind of shocked by the outcome when it gets to the end of it. Well, I just don't understand Johnny. He just stole all that money from us. Why are you surprised? Johnny thinks he's entitled to the money. He doesn't understand why you're withholding it from him. Parents of only children have a special challenge in that regard. Why is that? I think it's what Risha just said, right? Over in China when they've got the one child. There's our progeny forever, That's kind of the way it is for only children. There's no natural competition. That sounds kind of brutal. It sounds like, I don't want to be Marlon Perkins or anything like that. Some of you don't know who he was, but anyway, yeah, it's not survival of the fittest or anything like that. But if you've got siblings, then it's easier for the kid to understand. I'm not going to get my way all the time. I don't get all the attention. I don't get all the toys. The needs of the others might come along. Sometimes that's hard for older child. That really rocks their world. What? You're spending all the time with the baby? Their ideas or their preferences might not be given top bill. All right. Some practical advice for balance in what we were talking about and how we're raising our kids. And this is from when they're little. Might go a little, going back to the title when I talked about that. The original title that I had up there was Parenting Young Families. I saw a couple things wrong with that. Number one is a lot of us don't have young families anymore. A lot of us have teenagers and such. The other was we're not parenting families, we're parenting children. So change for that. This idea, though, when they're babies even, let your kid cry for a while. You know, a lot of people, oh, that's heartless. I don't think so. It teaches them that they're not going to get immediate gratification in life, which is often the case, and they shouldn't be surprised by that. Now, if you know they're safe, that's the caveat. Make sure your kid's safe. I mean, my dad was, you know, we'd like, you know, bust our knee on our bike or something when we were real little, come in crying, and my dad was real strict about, stop it, what's wrong? Hello, we're still having class here. Yeah, we still got a couple minutes. But my dad was real strict on, stop it, tell me what's wrong. The reason why is that he had a kid in their community, and Johnny came running up and was all just blah, blah, blah. And by the time they got Johnny sat down and understood, oh, calm down, calm down, calm down. That took about 10 minutes for the kid to stop blubbering and spitting out what they couldn't understand. His brother had fallen in the well or in the lake or something. So because they didn't make Johnny, what's wrong? So my dad had that kind of ingrained in him. So we'd come up to him, stop it, what's wrong? I skinned my knee, okay, blood, broken bones? No? Okay, go cry. I didn't need to cry then, you know. It's like, okay, the moment's kind of over, Dad, you know. It's all right. Let your kid wait a while, even as smallish babies. The first time they cry in the crib, if you are conditioned to go do that, you're setting a bad pattern. Now, do we want to take care of kids? Of course. Am I saying let them lay there for a half an hour? No. But let them cry for a little bit. Let your kid learn to entertain themselves as well as interact with you. Okay, that's when they're toddlers and such like that. That's a healthy thing. When they're older, make your kid wait to speak. We did that with our kids because we got tired of talking to somebody, having a conversation, and you know, what's going on? Daddy, 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 daddy. No. It fostered them to come up. They would come up and they would, you know, grab our hand for a minute. We'd acknowledge them and see if they're bleeding. And then when at a break in the conversation, we'd say, excuse me. And that taught our kids, adults are on a level that needs to be respected. It's an adult conversation. We will get to you. We care about you, but you're going to wait. Let your kids see that older people are given priority. Life does not stop when you become a parent. Important relationships do not end. You're still a son, you're still a daughter, sister, brother, friend, and spouse. If we let our kids become the center of our universe, some of those can suffer. Another thing to do, keep our start a date night once a week. Continue, or you guys start to do special things for your mates, meals, flowers, little gifts, etc. Invite friends over for a meal or a night of visiting. Do service projects for others from church. Things like communion to the shut-ins, raking leaves, things like that. This forces the focus onto others and what we do to serve them. Practice couch time, not psychiatric visits. This is just something Rhonda and I did. We took about 10 or 15 minutes to sit down on the couch and say, it's mom and dad time, we're talking. And you guys go do what you do, we'll be with you in a few minutes. But that also kind of fostered this idea of, okay, parents have things to discuss that need not be interrupted either. Okay. Well, I knew we were probably going to get out of time, and we are. Thank you.